Hey guys, Jake Danner here, and today I'm coming back at you with my Draftkings and Fanduel NFL picks, and this time it is for Week 7. Last week was not our best week statistically, and largely it was a part of my Drew Brees and Michael Thomas stack that didn't get too many points while playing from ahead. But this week, we're trying to get back on track and trying to place again for the 6th out of the 7th time this year, and that's really enough about last week. I'm sure you're ready to get right into the picks like me, and let's start right with the quarterback. At quarterback this week, we have Marcus Mariota of the Tennessee Titans going up against the Cleveland Browns. He's a DraftKings price of $6,900 and a FanDuel price of $8,200. So far in 2017, Cleveland's defense has allowed the highest passer rating at 111, which is phenomenal for a passer. Also, Marcus Mariota has increased mobility. If you watched the game last week against the Colts, Mariota stayed in the pocket the whole time, still passed for over 300 yards, so this week he has that same upside with passing, but now he has that addition of his very good mobility. Finally, I like Mariota this week because he comes as a part of a pretty cheap but high upside stack with some players that I'm going to mention later on in the video, so stay tuned for that. At running back 1, we have Le'Veon Bell of the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a DraftKings price of $9,100 and a FanDuel price of $9,700. And if you watched my videos before, you might know that I'm a Steelers fan, and this is not the reason why I'm choosing him here. There are a lot of pretty solid running back plays this week, but Bell is definitely my favorite of the higher priced players at running back. The first reason that I like him this week is largely due to the fact that Pittsburgh will most likely be playing with the lead. Vegas has Pittsburgh as a 5-point favorite. Secondly, the struggles of Ben Roethlisberger. Big Ben has not had his best year, and statistically one of his worst years since early on in his career. So this really helps the involvement of Le'Veon Bell, as the Steelers will try to get the ball to him as much as possible, much like last week against the Chiefs. Thirdly, I like Bell this week because he's averaging 5 catches per game. So if you're on DraftKings, that's at least 5 points just from collecting passes alone. So with that, with the addition of passing yards, he has a really high floor and an even higher ceiling this week. Also, over the last 4 games, Bell is averaging 1 touchdown. And I think he should be able to keep this average up, if not better, against the Bengals this week. At running back 2, we have Jay Ajayi of the Miami Dolphins going up against the New York Jets. He has a DraftKings price of $6,200 and a FanDuel price of $7,400. I recommended Ajayi the last time they played the Jets, and that did not turn out too well earlier on in the season in Week 2. However, since then, Ajayi's role has increased tremendously. Over the last 2 games, Ajayi had 26 and 25 carries, plus some catches, totaling 53 touches over the past 2 weeks. Also, the New York Jets still rank towards the bottom of the league in rushing yards allowed per game at 28th. And finally, the struggles of Jay Cutler will continue to force the Miami Dolphins to put the ball in Ajayi's hands, and I think at a price tag like this, he has a really high upside, and he will be one of my favorite plays this week at running back. At wide receiver 1 this week, we have Pierre Garçon of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Dallas Cowboys. He has a DraftKings price of $5,800 and a FanDuel price of $6,700. Now, this is not typically a guy you'd call a wide receiver 1, but despite his pricing, I really think he has that same upside as those high-tiered wide receiver 1s. Last week, the 49ers put quarterback Beathard? I'm not exactly sure how you say that. I know of the guy, but whenever they put him in the game, Garçon was his go-to target. He looked Garçon's way 12 times last game, only resulting in 5 catches. However, the targets are there for a monstrous game. Also, Dallas has an average at best secondary, so with that, plus Garçon being a wide receiver 1, you really further that floor and ceiling that I'm talking about. And then for being a number 1 receiver, Garçon is really just underpriced in my opinion. At wide receiver 2 this week, I'm going with Eric Decker of the Tennessee Titans going up against the Cleveland Browns. He has a DraftKings price of $4,300 and a FanDuel price of $5,100. This week he has a similar defensive matchup going against the Cleveland Browns, who are also not very good against the pass. Thirdly, he serves as a key piece in my stack with quarterback Marcus Mariota. And then finally, there was no price movement in Decker at all last week after receiving 15.8 DraftKings points. He played on a Monday night, which is after DraftKings and FanDuel put out their pricings for the following week, which is done the night before. So Decker's price hasn't moved at all despite having a really strong showing this week. So I really want to take advantage of that, especially in a stack with Mariota. At wide receiver 3, we're going cheap again with Benny Fowler of the Denver Broncos. He has a DraftKings price of $3,300 and a FanDuel price of $4,500. Now you might think I'm crazy for all of these lower priced receivers here, but the thing is, there's no one guy at the receiver position this week that's really head and shoulders above the rest. So I figured I'd go cheaper on the receivers with a lot of high upside, especially in as many GPPs as they play. With the injury to Emmanuel Sanders, Benny Fowler is forced into a larger role. This will be huge for a guy who only has a DraftKings price of $3,300. Secondly, Hayward, who is the number 1 corner of the LA Chargers, will most likely shadow Thomas for the game, meaning Fowler gets that secondary attention of the defense of the Chargers. And as you can see, Benny Fowler is really just a plug and play for a high reward, so I'm going to be playing him to enable myself to play guys like Mariota and Le'Veon Bell in most of my lineups this week. At tight end, we have Delanie Walker, also of the Tennessee Titans, going up against the Cleveland Browns. He has a DraftKings price of $5,800 and a FanDuel price of $5,900. So yes, I am picking on the Browns this week, which is never really a bad idea at all. So far in 2017, Cleveland has allowed the most yards to tight ends this year and the second most fantasy points allowed to tight ends this year. Also, Delanie Walker, as I'm sure you know by now, serves as a key stack in my stack with quarterback Marcus Mariota and Eric Decker. And then lastly, we have the injury to Jabril Peppers. This isn't really a big thing to consider, but for the most part, safeties are the guys that will be covering the tight ends, and Jabril Peppers has a toe injury that is inhibiting him, leaving his availability for this game up in the air. So if he's not able to play, this even furthers the capabilities of Delanie Walker this week. However, Jabril Peppers in or out, I still love Walker this week. At defense, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. They have a DraftKings price of $3,200 and a FanDuel price of $4,500. Last week, the Pittsburgh Steelers shut down the electric offense of Kansas City with Kareem Hunt and Tyreek Hill. This week, they have an even better matchup than this at home against the division rival Bengals, so usually division games are more so low scoring, especially in the AFC North. And to further support this claim, this game also has a very low Vegas total, one of the lowest of the week, meaning that not a lot of points are thought to be scored. Also, the Pittsburgh Steelers are favorites, so that even lowers the total of the Bengals production even more. And then finally, if you are using Le'Veon Bell this week, I would highly suggest using the Pittsburgh Steelers defense as well, as running back and defense often go hand in hand, especially when playing with a lead, because you got a guy who's dominating the ground game, controlling the game, and then you have a defense coming out there all fresh and ready to go. And then finally, for my additional picks for Week 7, I want to start with the quarterback, and this week I have Cam Newton going up against the Chicago Bears. He has a pretty similar pricing to Mariota, so I may be playing him this week. I'm not really sure. There's not really a huge standout at quarterback this week. There are a lot of good matchups that you can take advantage of. I just happen to be using Mariota. At running back, for my additional pick this week is Leonard Fournette, going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Last week I recommended him in my additional picks, and he paid off well in some of my lineups. And this week he has an even better matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, where the Jaguars will most likely be relying on the ground game of Fournette yet again. At wide receiver, we have Jarvis Landry going against the New York Jets. Last week, Landry had 14 targets with Devontae Parker out, and if Parker is out again this week, we can expect a steady stream of targets to come to Landry again. And even if Parker plays this week, I still like Landry, as he's a very big advocate to get a lot of catches and a lot of targets. especially on DraftKings. I like him because of that full point PPR there. At tight end, one of my favorite additional picks this week is Jack Doyle going against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's really cheap, and if you need some roster relief, then definitely look to Doyle at tight end. The Indianapolis Colts are going up against a really good secondary of the Jacksonville Jaguars with A.J. Boye and Jalen Ramsey as the other corner. With those two corners, I expect much of the attention of quarterback Jacoby Brissett to be at the tight end position and not your wide receivers being covered by those two stout cornerbacks. And then finally at defense, another salary relief option here is the Los Angeles Chargers going up against the Denver Broncos. As I already mentioned before, Emmanuel Sanders will be out this week, so that does help the Chargers defense. Also, the Broncos offense did not look very good last week against the New York Giants. Despite Simeon throwing for a lot of yards, they really just couldn't get together a solid drive and get points. So the downside for the Chargers is very limited here, and I think with a really cheap price tag, you can look to the Chargers to have a decent and solid outing this week. And that's it for my picks this week. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave a comment or question if you have any remarks about my video this week. And again, I thank you guys for watching. See you guys soon.